Jones into the corner. The whistle. It's done! It's over! It is over. Trinidad, with nothing to play for, has dethroned the United States, knocking them out of the World Cup 2018.
If this failure does not wake up everyone from U.S. soccer to Major League Soccer, from pay-to-play to broadcasters to everything, then we're all insane. What are we doing? What are we doing?
That's an excellent question. What are we doing? In this video, I'm going to attempt to answer just that, because the United States has a problem, a soccer problem, a problem that was exposed on the grandest stage when the United States men's national soccer team failed to qualify for the 2018 World Cup. The nation was left dumbfounded. How could the US, a country with the third largest population in the world, a nation with resources upon resources, fail on such a massive scale? Well, Team USA's failure was the result of major systematic flaws, the product of years of living by a money-hungry system which is unique to the youth soccer culture of the country I call home. Today, I will identify problem areas within the American youth soccer landscape, examine why the US has developed such a unique place in the world of youth soccer, and explain how these problems are being combated. America has never been a soccer country. We prefer to point out the other sports we dominate. We have the best basketball players. We're the only ones that play our version of football. We produce elite baseball players, golfers, and tennis stars. But why have no world-class male soccer stars ever emerged from this country? I need to emphasize male because the US has produced several world-class soccer players. They've just all been women. Unfortunately, outside of the US, many nations have long neglected their women's soccer infrastructure. In England, the Football Association banned women's soccer in member stadiums from 1921 until 1971, and it's only in recent times that other countries are catching up by providing their own domestic leagues for women. The implementation of things like Title IX in the US essentially gave the American women a bit of a head start compared to the rest of the world, and it's evident given the monumental success of the US women's national team over the past 25 years. To be clear, all of the problems I will address in this video do affect young female soccer players as well. Those issues just have not manifested themselves on the international stage for our women like it has for our men. But where has it all gone wrong? Well, in order to see where these flaws in the system originated, we have to take a look into the past. The United States Soccer Federation was founded way back in 1913. The US men's national team competed at several World Cups in the first half of the 20th century, even beating England 1-0 at the 1950 edition of the tournament. Even after that landmark victory, soccer was always cast aside in common American culture. The 1994 World Cup was hosted in the US, and that set the stage for the 1996 launch of Major League Soccer. MLS was extremely unique in many respects, and the quirks of the league in its early days deserves its own documentary. Regardless of how different it was to every other soccer league in the world, the American market still didn't care, and MLS was losing money even into the new millennium. Those quirks were eventually phased out, and the turning point for the league occurred in 2007 with the LA Galaxy signing of David Beckham. When Beckham arrived in the league, MLS had 13 teams. By the time he left in 2012, the league had expanded to 19. As of today, the league sits at 26 teams with plans to expand to 30 by 2023. Beckham was the catalyst for turning MLS from a non-profitable and generally ignored league to one of the most supported soccer leagues in the Western Hemisphere. Seriously, the growth that has occurred in MLS over the last 2 decades cannot be understated. For context, here's what the MLS Cup final looked like in 2000, and here is what it has looked like the last several years. Despite the insane economic growth of MLS over the past decade, the sport of soccer is still struggling in America regarding our own youth development. In the same period of time where MLS has flourished, perhaps surprisingly, soccer participation among young people in the US has fallen significantly. Even if soccer is somewhat on the downturn, it still ranks as the 3rd most popular team sport in the US as far as youth participation. While the majority of those participants were merely recreational players playing low-level competitions such as AYSO, the next level of the sport for those who are more skilled represents a significant roadblock for many coming through the youth system in this country. According to Time, the average cost of playing soccer in the United States in 2017 was $1,472. However, it's important to know that this figure includes all levels of soccer. If a child wants to play travel soccer at a club where they'll face reasonably high competition and have an opportunity to get scouted for a Division I college program or even a professional team, families will usually have to pay thousands of dollars to simply get a chance to secure their child a spot on the roster. The seasonal fees for travel clubs can be anywhere from $500 to potentially upwards of $5,000 per season, and that's without including travel costs. It's not uncommon to see affluent families spending over $10,000 per season between private coaches, travel, and team fees if a player is serious about the sport. Tim Howard, a U.S. soccer legend, admitted that his path to the pros may not have been possible if his goalkeeping coach did not subsidize his training fees while he was in college. These steep costs and lack of affordable options after basic recreational town soccer systematically freezes out those from lower income communities, naturally limiting the US's talent pool. And keep in mind, this pay-to-play structure is not seen anywhere else around the world anywhere close to this extent. Why is it here in the US? Well, this can mostly be pinned down to the fact that soccer in the US didn't really become profitable until about a decade ago, and most clubs haven't had the time or money to acquire their own facilities, instead often renting them from local high schools or colleges.
The going rate right now, when you are, at least where I live in Massachusetts, is like $225 or $250 an hour for a full field. And it's more if you want to have, if you have lights. So if you're a team that trains, and we would train at least 3 times a week, sometimes 4 times a week, and you go for 10 months a year, like, do the math on that.
Fortunately, recent investment and economic growth has meant that there is currently only one Major League Soccer club that charges for their academy. I'm looking at you, Minnesota. Unless a player growing up in a lower income household is so talented that they get signed to one of these academies, they'll have to go through the challenge of finding scholarships for local travel clubs or seek less expensive opportunities, which may not even be available to them depending on where they live. While soccer is the world's game, in the US, it's more like the white upper middle class game. We are talking about a sport that does not require a lot of money to play. We can see that from the favelas of Brazil to the alleyways of Paris to the fields of Senegal. However, if you look around at a high-level travel soccer game, you're more than likely to see a swarm of white suburban families making 6-figure salaries. We as a nation have turned the cheapest of sports into one of the most exclusive. Even legendary American goalkeeper Hope Solo recently called soccer in the US a, quote, rich white kid sport. And she's not wrong. Just look at the US roster from the 2017 U17 World Cup. Most of these kids are coming from very wealthy, mostly white suburban communities. It's because of pay-to-play, hundreds of talented Americans, particularly Latinos, slip through the cracks every year because America simply does not have enough affordable options to play soccer past the rec ball level.
You have to give parents a better alternative option. So one thing I've heard from parents sometimes is they want to get off the travel cycle, and even themselves, and it is too much money, too much time, but they feel like you go back to the rec level or whatever the option is in their community. Maybe there isn't even any other option in their community.
These are not problems that exist in places like Europe, because if a player was talented but perhaps not at the very top percentile of their age group, they would likely get signed to an academy of a 2nd or 3rd division club in their country. It's not the very top, but it at least puts them on a pathway to becoming a professional if they continue to grow and progress. Unfortunately, due to the sheer size of the US and the lack of a well-endowed soccer history, America never developed a strong and cohesive national soccer pyramid. However, now soccer is well-endowed, and there's still flaws in the American development system. I'll show you. So let's map out a teenage soccer player's journey in Europe versus in the US. If at age 11, a French player was noticeably better than their peers, but not so much better that a massive club like PSG or Lyon would scoop them up, they might get recruited and signed by an academy of a smaller club. Let's use 2nd Division Toulouse FC as an example. That player would be given education, travel, apparel, elite coaching, and it would all be paid for by Toulouse. As they grow up, they would play in the academy teams for Toulouse, whose facilities are adjacent to the first team's training ground. They would eventually play for the U17 and U19 squads, who compete against other academy teams in that age bracket from around France. If they were good enough and hadn't been released yet, it's possible they would get the opportunity to debut for the Toulouse first team at age 18, 19, or 20. And then they would be a full-on professional soccer player, and even though they're in France's second division, they have a chance to get promoted with the club and compete in Ligue 1. Or if they significantly exceed their peers, they can earn a move to a bigger club. Now compare that to America, where if an 11-year-old was a standout player but not part of an MLS academy, they would have to find a local travel soccer club which they could afford. The player's family would have to provide travel money, meals, and pay for the child's uniform. If that player was still not signed to an MLS academy before they were out of high school, they would likely end up pursuing a Division I college scholarship. And after all that, if they were a standout player in college and deemed good enough to be drafted by an MLS franchise or just signed to a contract after they graduated, they would probably be 21 or 22 years old without having played a minute of professional soccer, while our friend in Europe has already been playing professionally for multiple seasons. There are obviously many variables regarding examples like this, but I think this lays out a clear map of how and why the system on this side of the Atlantic is much slower and offers much less player support. America's youth soccer structure is also a prime example of a more widespread phenomenon, which is the commercialization among youth sports in America.
A lot of people are making a lot of money off of this. There's also actually not a lot of transparency in youth sports in the U.S. in terms of where all this money is going. Like, I think a lot of parents would be shocked to know how much their soccer coach or their club soccer director is making, from a travel elite, club team. It's six figures, in some cases. We've often talked about at Project Play that we hear that people say youth sports is really become professionalized, and what we say is no, it's really commercialized. If it was professionalized, we'd have a lot better standards across the board, particularly when it comes to coach training.
As John mentioned, coaching in the States is also a point of contention for many, myself included. Oftentimes, youth soccer coaches in the US put more emphasis on the result of a game than they do on the technical development of players as individuals. In addition, US coaches seem to have a much more helicopter coaching style where they have much more control over the players. This is a uniquely American phenomenon, as former US soccer employee and current president of 4 Soccer Ventures, Ryan Mooney, explains.
I think there's an overemphasis, and there is way too much kind of joystick coaching, right? You're telling kids what to do, you're directing them, if you will, which is traditionally a very kind of North American sports style of coaching, right? So and so the coach calls up the play, and I tell the players what to do, right? They go out there and they do it, right? So and so I tell them what pitch to throw, whatever it is. And in soccer, you're really looking to have, ideally, really kind of obviously, talented players from a technical standpoint, but they need to be autonomous in their decision making. They need to be all these cliches of whether it's reading the game, being creative, it doesn't matter what you loop in there. And I think where we really fall down is that when we begin to actually try to take the time to teach kids, then we start by teaching them the wrong things, right? We teach them to stand in a line and wait your turn and only touch a ball 10 times during a training session, rather than having one ball per kid and everyone's dribbling around and getting 100 touches.
This type of joystick coaching, as Ryan describes it, I believe does more harm than good. I think we have a lot of soccer players who want to express themselves on the field, but they can't because the US's overcoached environment doesn't allow for this type of free expression on the ball. And so often it's that street ball instinct which Americans lack at the top level. When I began my research for this video, I wanted to find a solution to this broken system, but it's not so simple. While straight up ending pay-to-play would surely give a much wider range of players the ability to at least experience soccer at a high level, it wouldn't change the underqualified coaches, the high cost of obtaining a US coaching license, and the lack of scouting in urban areas. The closest thing I have to an answer to fix this broken system can be summed up in 2 words: invest locally. One professional soccer team that is actively aiding local investment, believe it or not, is from outside the United States. Cholos Academy FC New Jersey is a youth team and affiliate of Mexican professional side Cholos, also known as Club Tijuana. Based in Cliffwood, New Jersey, Cholos has recognized the need for smaller clubs to step in locally and bridge the gap between high-level soccer and communities blocked out by our large money-backed system. According to the New York Times, Xolos has consistently operated their youth programs with little or no money. Their New Jersey youth affiliate has a roster which is 80% Hispanic. Some of the kids' parents work as dishwashers and day laborers. These are the communities whom get forgotten by our current model. And while Xolos' free youth academy is a rarity, they're not the only place in the state who has been able to bring soccer closer to being a sport of the working class. Kearney, New Jersey, the subject of the documentary Soccer Town, USA, fosters a robust street soccer culture that is commonly seen outside the United States. The town of Kearney alone produced 3 of the all-time greats of US soccer. Kids in Kearney grew up viewing soccer unlike most Americans do, as a fun but still competitive street game to play with friends, not as something you're dragged to by your parents on Sunday morning. The best way to engage future generations is by making soccer a grassroots sport, and the first step to doing that is by providing low-cost opportunities to these previously overlooked areas. Our system is flawed, there's no doubt about that. But 2020 has actually been a year which displays a great improvement in our development system, even looking just at the past several years. Tyler Adams, Chris Richards, Weston McKennie, and Giovanni Reina are all first-team players playing at some of Europe's most prestigious clubs. They all came through MLS academies. We may be entering the golden generation of American soccer, but the thing is, any country can have golden generations and it doesn't always guarantee international success. Just ask England. The way to sustain being competitive at international level is always through youth development. And despite several recent American success stories, this pay-to-play model has turned soccer for many Americans into a financial struggle more than an athletic one. In order to combat this broken system, we need to address the pay-to-play issue, which will undoubtedly increase the talent pool. We need to turn this sport from an elitist game only for the privileged few to a working class game for everybody. We need to make sure that those who cannot afford to pay for an elite travel team have alternative options to play the game in their community. Most importantly, we must invest locally and provide spaces without supervision, allowing kids to express themselves with the ball at their feet. If we're only looking where the wealth is, we're going to miss out on something special. It just makes me wonder if those 11 players that were on the field that fateful night in Trinidad were really the best 11 this country had to offer.